Hey, we're back. Dave Altavilla here for Hot Hardware, and you are watching the latest episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks webcast. I am with Marco Chiappetta and Paul Lilly. Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely. How we doing?
Doing pretty good, man. Can't complain. Got nice and loose before the show with a couple of off-color comments, stuff that I specialize in. But,
yeah,
everything's good.
Yeah, that a low blow right off the bat with the gentleman comment.
Well, we got to keep you guys light on your toes. I mean, come on. I don't want to make it too easy on you out of the chute.
It's been a while. I missed this. I'm sure our viewers did too.
Yes, the banter, the relentless jabbing and other sort of fun stuff. Yeah, no, I miss it too, guys. It was kind of sad, but it's good to be back. We have a lot to talk about now because it's been like over a month, I think. That's far too long between episodes. So we'll start with an apologies. We're tardy, but now we're here and we'll be digging in because, man, the tech landscape has absolutely been bubbling over with all sorts of I don't know, there's snowballs in hell and stuff like that going on. It just seems like some sort of paradigm shift kind of stuff in the air these days. And we have a lot to talk about. So let's dig right into it. One of the things that seems to be the trend these days is that our friends at Microsoft are really starting to get some hip and cool back with respect to hardware. And actually, I'm not sure they ever lost it, but they are really putting themselves on the map these days, I guess would be a good way to phrase it with respect to new devices. And Marco, you were down in New York City for the launch of the Microsoft Surface Studio all-in-one PC. You saw it firsthand. We have a little tease on the website of it. Hopefully we're going to be getting the system in for review soon. But what were your impressions? And my goodness, what is this with the folks from Redmond and punching out some unique hardware?
Yeah, so cool stuff. Before I dive in, let me finally get this out of the way early in the podcast so everybody understands. I am monitoring comments on YouTube and Facebook. If anybody's watching, and we do have multiple people watching already, if you want to comment and participate live, throw something up on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll try to work it in as quickly as we can. All right, so getting back to the Surface Studio and Microsoft's event in New York City. So the Surface Studio wasn't the only thing launched. There was an updated Surface Book launched as well with more powerful graphics and a faster processor. That machine looks exactly the same, though. There's also bigger battery in there. So we haven't tested it, but should be faster, better battery life in the same form factor as the original Surface Book. Now, the Surface Studio was the big wow unveil. This is Microsoft's first all-in-one desktop PC. Now, inside the system is a Skylake processor, various speeds available, and also discrete NVIDIA graphics, again, various speeds available. The top of the line version will have a GeForce GTX 980M. There's also a hybrid storage solution, a really compact chassis for all that hardware, mounted to a beautiful 28-inch touchscreen on a nicely articulating hinge. And there is a companion dial available that enables some new input functionality. I got to tell you, the machine's beautiful. Out of the gate, machine is absolutely gorgeous. It's a slightly less than 5K screen, but beautifully thin. Microsoft says the thinnest LCD ever made. Super high res, super crisp, great viewing angles and clarity and color output. Just a gorgeous screen. The hinge is super easy. You can literally just barely pinch that screen and position it anywhere you want. And performance does feel very good with Skylake and Maxwell GPU in there. Kind of a little that it's a hybrid storage solution and it's not Kaby Lake and Pascal. I don't think people are really going to care all that much. It would have been great to see Kaby Lake and Pascal in there. It just seems like those parts would be made for this tiny chassis, but overall, just a gorgeous, innovative machine from Microsoft.
Yeah, interesting. I think we can certainly give them a pass on Kaby Lake. I mean, let's talk about tech real quick, and then we'll talk about design, because I think design is what probably the majority of what makes this product interesting. But you know, we've got a quad-core processor in there, and as far as we know, Kaby Lake SKUs are only currently, at least from what we've seen in OEMs that have them out in the channel and things like notebooks, are only currently dual cores, right? So,
well, the mobile parts are only dual cores. Yeah, then it's again,
Yeah.
it's a timing and availability thing. They couldn't put a quad core Kaby Lake in there and get it out for the holidays. It just basically tells someone who's tech savvy that this is Gen 1 and it's going to get updated fairly quickly, because
yeah,
it's same power envelope, faster processor. Just makes sense to put Kaby Lake in there at some point.
totally agreed, and it would be nice. I mean, you used to see, and we'll touch on the A company as it relates to this product later on. But you used to see that even like Apple or an occasional OEM would get a lead on a CPU SKU or even a GPU SKU ahead of everybody with a new Halo product release. I think Apple pulled that off once or twice with Intel processors back in the day, a long time ago, but. You would think actually Pascal would have been available, at least for qualification at that point. And with the power envelopes and the efficiency and the throughput performance increases that Pascal brings in a lower power envelope, performance per watt, that could have been a really nice, compelling graphic solution in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The flip side is, Microsoft went kind of bleeding edge with the Surface 4 Pro and Surface Book, and there were initially a ton of issues that took a bunch of firmware updates to resolve. So maybe they're being extra conservative this time around, and there's an argument to be made for that angle. Absolutely. Again, just as a nerd, for a $3,000 machine that just looks so bleeding edge, to have previous gen technology in there is like, darn.
Yeah.
Still absolutely beautiful though.
And what is it, a 980M or a 970M that's in there for the GPU, the Maxwell GPU?
I think the high end one is 980M. The lower end one is 965, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, right. No, I think you're exactly right. And that's a ton of horsepower for a desktop all in one for sure. The 980 especially. Paul, your opinions on this, and let's talk about design. What does this do for you? Anything? Are you into the all-in-one thing? And I guess what's
I do like the all-in-one. Here's the thing, though. I'm not so quick with the free pass. I know why they're using last gen hardware. It's the timing issue. But the litmus test, if you're a tech savvy dude, is would you buy this? It starts at $3,000, and most of you are going to say it's cool, but if I were going to buy it, I'm going to wait for Kaby Lake and I'm going to wait for Pascal, which means you're going to skip this product, at least for right now. The flip side to that, though, is this is what Microsoft does in hardware now. It basically gathers up its OEM partners and says, look, you guys aren't getting our vision. Here is how to build a solid, well, they started with the Surface Pro, and then they did the Surface Book. Now they're showing them how to make an awesome all-in-one. So I think the more exciting part to me is what their partners will do kind of with this design, because they'll do faster versions, cheaper versions. They'll do their own kind of takes on it, just as they've done with Surface Book and Surface Pro.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point you make, Paul, and that actually sort of dovetails into what I was interested in kicking around the roundtable here on this topic, and that is how the tail is sort of there. It is.
That was early, record breaking.
Officially a podcast.
Don't you call me? I'm in my podcast. Sorry.
We're back, folks.
I think he just threw up on them, whoever they were, too. Wow. But what's interesting now is we've got a dynamic here where the tail is kind of wagging the dog. We used to, lots of folks used to praise Apple for their industrial design chops, for bringing out new innovation, new form factors, new design trends that others began to follow and copy. I mean, whether you talk about, OEMs on the PC side, let's face it, the handsets, you can name a number of manufacturers that take cues from the iPhone. And even in the notebook side, back in the day when the Air was big, there were plenty of manufacturers that sort of went that all aluminum look and chiclet keycaps and all that stuff for notebooks. Now we have a situation where the tables have turned and Microsoft is clearly innovating. They've kind of got the best of both worlds, right? They've got a whole, army of OEMs that are taking their software and building products based on that vision. And my phone's ringing now too, but at least it's in vibrate. So they've got that army of OEMs, but they're also setting the trend by designing halo products that they see, that they envision can sort of lead the charge for the different device types and markets they want to serve. And the all-in-one here from Microsoft in their vision is pretty damn impressive. That articulating hinge, the dial. What do you guys think about that? Apple hasn't really, in the last couple of releases, whether you talk about the MacBook Pro that we saw, which was kind of like more the same, and a few oddities that folks were kind of scratching their heads that Apple didn't take to the next level. But I mean, and the same thing with phones, where we now have Microsoft in a position where they're kind of showing Apple how it's done. Here's an all-in-one, pretty impressive design approach. Here's the Surface Pro 4, kicks butt for a tablet, convertible, and the iPad Pro never really competed, right? Hasn't yet, anyways, in terms of that use case. What do you guys think about that? Any thoughts? It's fascinating.
I agree with you. I think what's happened at Apple, if you look at a new Apple device, like the new MacBooks are gorgeous to look at. I think they're beautiful. They're just gorgeous pieces of hardware. But I think they've taken design and sort of pushed the importance of a beautiful design maybe slightly above the user experience. It seems innovative to have the touch bar and maybe to just have USB-C, but for practical purposes, they're actually harming the user experience with, it's just not the time to not have regular USB ports and to not have touch, on a Mac, when Apple sort of made touch awesome with the iPhone. And it just, so we're going to be talking about the ZenBook in a minute after this. And, I've been using the ZenBook, and dongles suck. So it does. No, you're right. They do have this gorgeous machine, and you want to plug in a card reader, or even everyone's got a drawer full of thumb drives that you now can't plug into these new thin notebooks. It's just dumb. So sacrifice a fraction of a millimeter and throw a couple of regular USB ports or an HDMI port on there. Apple's got 18 dongles for sale on their website now. Their fastest growing product category is dongles. Think about that. Who wants a dongle? Who wants to have more crap hanging off this beautiful machine? I don't think anybody would prefer the dongle approach when you can have a port on the device. I personally would gladly trade a millimeter of height or 2 millimeters of height if I didn't have any dongles. I personally don't like it.
Let's talk about courage, right? When Apple came out and said courage, I keep thinking of the Cowardly Lion whenever I hear that. But literally, like, okay, we had the courage to remove the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack from the iPhone. You know why they did it, right? I mean, they wanted to get it thinner. It just takes a little bit more metal out of the equation for them. And I can go along with, everybody's heard, the vision of computing without wires. That's a lofty goal. That's something that actually should be done. Over time, there's a migration process here. I don't think we're there. Everybody's using headphones, buds. That's just where we're at these days. But you get to the MacBook, and there's a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on that thing.
I guess they lost their courage with that.
Lost my courage. And, folks are sort of poking at him about that because, there's some courage here. There's no courage there.
Wait. But the kicker, the best kicker, your new iPhone 7 needs a dongle to connect to the new MacBook.
Yeah, that's like,
you need a dongle. Like, it's just, what the heck's going on?
What are you thinking? No, I agree. Paul, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's kind of the challenge that Tim Cook faces now, is what to do next with Apple, because they caught gold with the iPhone, when Steve Jobs was there, but he also had a way of selling people on what he thought you needed, whether you wanted it or not. And I don't know if Tim Cook has that ability yet. We're still finding out. I know it's been a few years, but we're still finding out. Right now, it looks like maybe not, but another couple of years, see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a leadership thing or if it's a situation where they're a victim of their own success and they're sort of saying, no, here's our design vision, and our passionate following will adopt it. Maybe there's a little bit of that going on there too. I don't know, but you have to hand it to them. Back in the day, they were leading the design charge. They were absolutely, I mean, you got to give them credit where credit is due. Apple was really a leader in industrial design, and they're following now and making some missteps along the way. And it's fascinating to watch Microsoft pick up that slack with this all-in-one, which is clearly a breakout device. There's some innovative features with it. By the way, let's roll back here real quick on the OEM ecosystem, and then we can move on to the ZenBook, Marco. That Surface Dial was something that we've seen before, and it's public now. The folks at Dell were working on. They've got a product, and I can't get too much into it. I did sign an NDA, but they actually announced it at Adobe Max, or sneak peeked it at Adobe Max. So there's nothing that I'd have to shoot anybody for telling. But it's an interesting thing, because that exact interface, that dial interface, Dell has been working on for years. And Microsoft came out and said, you know what, here it is. Here's our product, sort of driving a stake in the sand. And now, Dell might be playing a little bit of catch up. I've heard rumblings when this thing will be coming out. But clearly, that's something that, the ecosystem has been, marinating over, and Microsoft just went out and made it so. And so, I think that's courage, right?
Marco, you went hands-on with this, right?
Yes, I played with it for a few hours.
What did you think about the dial? Is it something you think people are going to use, or?
I think design. So part of the Microsoft event was also lots of information about the next Windows 10 update, the creators update, they're calling it. And I think users of like a Wacom, I think what's it called, a Cintiq, their high-end screen/tablets. Those type of users, yeah, they'll absolutely totally dig the dial. In playing with it while I was there, it was a little finicky. Like you'd go to spin it, and even if you didn't quite press it all the way, it kind of behaved like you pressed it. So there's probably some firmware tweaking that's going to happen between now and wider availability. But it feels like a quality piece of hardware. It's a heavy metal puck. The movement is super smooth, and it just kind of works. Wherever you place it on the screen, you get the cool little menu that pops out. So I could totally see design professionals using it. Absolutely. Something that I've said from the beginning of touch interfaces was, if it's not more efficient than the mouse and keyboard, ultimately it's going to fail, for certain use cases. That sort of adds a total new layer, input mechanism for these all-in-ones. And it actually can improve productivity. So I think the dial is going to be a cool add-on for creative professionals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sharing it out for everybody here. Does that dial actually, so it looks like it's maybe on like the 45 here, the panel. Does the dial actually stay up in that position, or do you have to hold it there? Does it slide down? I mean,
it's got like a non-skid felt bottom. So you just plop it on the screen and it'll stay.
It sticks kind of nice, and you can slide it around.
But you also don't have to have it on the screen. So if you want your whole display open, you can have it off to the side and still dial it.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Interesting to see the folks at Microsoft innovating now, and Apple playing a little bit of catch up. Yeah, we'll have to see what this landscape brings, because right now it's all topsy-turvy, and it's kind of exciting. I mean, I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff in a couple months at CES in Las Vegas in January, right?
Yeah, there'll probably be lots of cool stuff out there this year.
Yeah. So let's move along. Let's talk about, Marco. You took a look at a new breakout product from the folks at ASUS, the ZenBook 3. They are actually one of the first. I actually have a Dell product in house right now, the XPS 13, but one of the first, along with Dell, that has a Kaby Lake based ultrabook out, and that's the ZenBook 3, right?
Absolutely. So let me grab it and see if I could show you guys here. Let me hide behind it. Oh, wait, I can't hide behind it because it's razor thin. This thing is super tiny, super light. This particular model, there's two ZenBook 3 models that were announced, one with the Core i5, one with the Core i7, different SSD sizes too. This is the Core i7 7500U based version with 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gigabyte PCI Express NVMe SSD, plus all the other goodies you'd expect: 802.11 AC, Wi-Fi, awesome touchpad, fingerprint reader, backlit keyboard, gorgeous full HD display. Of course, ultra thin, 11.9 millimeters at its thickest point, less than 2 pounds. Absolutely gorgeous machine in terms of design, if you ask me. 12.5-inch full HD screen, kind of just the right size for me. I know the other guys like their notebooks bigger, but for travel, I absolutely love the form factor. Now that I've been using it for a few weeks, well, actually, before I get into that, if you come check out the full review, you will notice killer performance, not just for the form factor, just killer performance, period, with Kaby Lake and a super fast SSD and plenty of memory in there. Also, very good battery life. It's not at the top of the charts because the thing is so tiny, but very good battery life as well. The screen also looks great. It's a great screen to work on, and despite the small keyboard, actually really good keyboard to type on. The only issue that I found is the placement of the power button. Let me pop this open and show you what I'm talking about. The power button, whoa, I am losing my earphone. Hold on a second. The power button is actually looks like just like a keyboard button. So I keep finding myself hitting that to backspace. So minor issue there. But overall, absolutely gorgeous, great machine. Love the design, but again, the only ports on this thing, if I flip it around, there's a headphone jack there and a single USB-C jack right there. So if you want to connect full-size USB, HDMI, or a charger and a device, you have to use a dongle that's included. And it's this, white dongle that just doesn't match the machine at all. It looks terrible hanging off the notebook. So ASUS nailed the design, and it's not terribly priced. The top of the line one is only $15.99. The Core i5 version is only $10.99. But if you want this gorgeous, super light, awesome, razor thin ultrabook, just reserved to the fact that you're going to also have dongles in your notebook bag.
I'm sharing out the dongle there. You've got a USB, HDMI, and USB-C dongle to USB-C. 3-in-1 dongle there. Yeah, everybody's going thin. This thing's 2 pounds, but it's like we're gonna have to live the dongle life if we want it this thin. Is that our reality? It doesn't have to be, I don't think.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be once USB-C is is commonplace and everyone's got USB. But for now, we're in that transition stage where guys like me are going to complain about it.
Yeah. I was checking out the battery life, and it blows me away actually that this thing performs so well from a battery life standpoint. It weighs 2 pounds with the battery, so 2 pounds even. Is that right? Like 910 grams.
I think it's like just shy. Like if you actually do the math, it's like 1.94 pounds or something like that.
That is nuts. Yeah. And it actually lasted almost 6 hours in our HD video loop test, which puts it right in the top quadrant of all the ultrabooks we've tested over the years. And so, this thing is rocking a Core i5 7200U, or did you have the 7500U?
Core i7 7500U.
Core
so
i7, wow.
In that particular test that you mentioned, it kicks butt in that test because one of the features of Kaby Lake is the new media engine that basically accelerates everything with minimal CPU resources. So you can play multimedia files with tiny, really low CPU consumption and power use. So you get that nice long battery life. So just quickly, I also want to mention comments are not working on YouTube. Unfortunately, we have to figure out that, but I am still monitoring Facebook. I had Chris send me an IM earlier, and I just got an IM from Chris who says that the weight of the ZenBook is less than the power brick on the Alienware 15.
Well, that's a whole different ball of wax, the Alienware 15.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's actually share out this chart quickly to everybody here. So here's the ZenBook in the gold bar on the chart. It actually came in fourth against machines like the HP Spectra X360 15T. That's a 15-inch. Admittedly with a 4K display there, and then the X1 Yoga with OLED display, 1440p display there. But these are larger 14 and 15-inch machines, that don't even come near approaching the 2 pound weight class. I mean, I think the X1 Yoga OLED is probably about 2.8 if I'm not mistaken. But impressive battery life for such a sliver of a device. Wow.
Yeah, it's great. And one other thing that I need to mention that's kind of exceptional on this machine. ASUS crammed quad speakers into it, and they kind of positioned them two on the top deck and two that kind of downfire. For an ultrabook, the volume's not going to fill a room. They're tiny speakers, and you're not going to get room shaking bass out of these tiny speakers. But the audio is also awesome on this machine.
Really?
Yes, like surprisingly good. How much I like the audio.
I've almost never heard a notebook that I like the audio on. I have fussy ears, and they all sound tinny to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tinny. You're not going to get huge bass out of these little tiny drivers out of there. But in comparison to the Surface and a handful of other ultrabooks that I've used, awesome sound comparatively.
Cool, Paul. Would you go the way of the dongle just for thin?
I don't know if I would go for it just for the thin, but what I like about this is I'm looking at the lower end SKU. It's $1,100. Usually when you get into the premium ultrabooks and you look at the lower end SKU, there's something on the hardware sheet where you're like, oh, I wish it would have had this, or I wish it would have had this. But this one has decent processor. It has 256 gigabyte SSD instead of 128 and 8 gigabytes RAM instead of 4 gigabyte. I don't know, to me, it's compelling value.
And your SKU, Marco, that you tested with the Core i7 7500U, that's priced in at $1,599, while the i5 version dual core is $1,099, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. That's
it includes a carry case, everything you need. It's a nice package.
Come check it out. The ASUS ZenBook 3 at HotHardware. We got the full review up with copious benchmarks, battery life test, all that good stuff. Good job on that, by the way. It's a nice machine.
Thank you.
All right, let's move along. Let's move along to something that, Paul, you're my straight man. You're totally my straight man. This is the other end of the spectrum as far as notebooks go. Or was it Chris that was my straight man? I'm sorry, not Paul. Chris.
Yeah, Chris did this one.
No, I meant to say the Alienware 15. He was talking about the 15 that he's looking at now, the power brick being heavier than the ASUS.
Oh, okay.
In the comments there. Yeah, Chris, you're absolutely right. And this is the new age of gaming notebooks. I'm actually taking a look at the Alienware 13 R3, so the 13-inch version. Let's see if I can get it on the camera here without blowing it out. But this is Alienware's latest gaming 13-inch notebook. It is an impressive machine, to say the least. It has a beautiful 13.3-inch OLED display. It does have quad-core Skylake, Core i7 6700. Yeah, Chris is bullying me on IM now. To be fair, it's only 2 pounds and 2 ounces. That's the ZenBook. Anyways, I'm getting all kinds of messages here. So OLED display, 13.3-inch. It does have a quad-core Skylake 6700 HQ processor. However, it also has Pascal, so it's GeForce GTX 1060, which is essentially the desktop variant in a notebook. And I'm still going through battery life, but the performance on this thing is unbelievable for its size. You're talking 5.8 pounds, but 13-inch notebook, not too chunky. It does have what we call back here. It's got this little bump out in the back, which is where a fair amount of the cooling is. Some of the fans and the heatsink resources are in the back there. And then copious amounts of ports. You're not going to have to carry a dongle with this thing. You've got gigabit Ethernet. You've got DisplayPort, HDMI, USB-C, Alienware graphics amplifier port. If you want to take that 1060 up a notch and connect an external graphics box, they have that. And so really impressive machine. Keyboard is totally solid. The trackpad lights up pretty cool. You can see that. So you've got that Alien Effects bling, customized lighting around the keyboard area, like 8 different zones. But this thing puts up benchmarks like blowing out last year's top end, 10-pound, 12-pound gaming notebook in a 5-pound, 13-inch machine, a 5.8-pound, 13-inch machine. Impressed all the heck out of me with this thing. Alienware did a really nice job as well with taking the build quality up a notch. One of the things that Alienware has is really nice design chops from a mechanical standpoint. But last year, things were a little bit more plasticky in the last generation. This generation, we've got an aluminum lid and base. And so, things are a little bit more angular, a little bit more rigid, a little bit more dense, I guess I would say is the word. but performance and build quality and that display, once you see OLED, you can't unsee it. I'll just put it that way. You'll look at an IPS notebook display compared to this thing, and it's just like night and day. Really impressive stuff. I am going through battery life. I have a hunch it's going to be very good. It's got a what's the watt hour battery on it? I want to say it's 70 something watt hour battery, 72, 73 watt hour battery. It's pretty serious in terms of what it packs into a 13-inch frame and the performance and the build quality that's involved here. A lot of folks, it's funny. Alienware is kind of a brand that we get a lot of passionate opinions about. Folks, frankly, either sometimes love them or hate them. They basically, from what I'm getting, what we're seeing for feedback in our comment section on the site or on YouTube, people are loving this machine, and the folks at Dell are really innovating these days as well. Whether you talk about the XPS line, which was very successful the last few generations, and now Alienware is stepping up on the gaming side of the house with some pretty breakout stuff. Have you guys gotten a chance to take a look at this thing? I'm pleased as punch with it so far, and I'm not quite done with putting it through its paces though.
Yeah, I saw it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Paul. You can go first.
I was gonna say the usual. You talked about people knocking Alienware. The usual knock is the price. We talked about the price of the ZenBook, but on this one, it starts at $1,200 and it still has Pascal in there. It's if not the cheapest, it's one of the cheapest routes to the GTX 1060 in mobile.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. That admittedly is not the SKU with the OLED display. The OLED display it's a premium SKU product at $2,099, and then you get lots of other upgrades with that. You get a higher capacity SSD, 512 gig and up, 16 gigs of RAM. You get a higher end processor, I think, as well. But yeah, you can.
They have 3 displays on this. It starts with the TN panel, but then there's the Full HD IPS panel for $1,500, which is still about as cheap as it gets going to a 1060. Because I had shopped those recently, and about $1,500 is about what you're going to spend if you want a 1060 in a laptop.
Yeah, I think what we're realizing now is that Alienware is really beginning to hit stride with respect to the I guess the buying resources and the sort of channel access that Dell corporate has with respect to whether it be components and all that good stuff, just the leverage they have as a combined entity now. So they're starting to put up some competitively priced products as well. They're not always the premium price point anymore. Marco, thoughts?
Yeah, I dug the machine. I saw it a few weeks ago out at an event in New York, and yeah, I totally dig the design. It's got the little bump out the back, but that's just to get some extra cooling in there. I love how they brought the lighting back to the touchpad area. That just looks so cool to see in action, to have RGB lighting on the touchpad. The OLED screen is obviously gorgeous. If you have the ability to go see an OLED screen in person, just us talking about it and showing you pictures and video do not do it justice. The blacks are just so deep in black, and the colors are so rich, and the viewing angles are so good. The OLED displays are just killer to see live. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Just a gorgeous machine all around.
Yeah, I'm gonna share this out. Here's a quick look at the machine in our quick little preview we did. Here's the backlit keyboard, the backlit touchpad. This is just set up in standard blue now, but you can customize 8 different zones on that. But what's interesting here, here's the OLED display, and they've got a nice hinge mechanism here, very strong, very rigid lid and hinge mechanism in this build here. Swings 180 degrees, but I've got that flat, and I've got the camera on an angle now, so that I can get the just the Z height of the machine, just the thickness of the machine more in view for the shot. And you can see that OLED display. That's not even losing a hint. Very little loss in terms of viewing angle and brightness and color from that angle there, from that extreme camera angle.
Yep.
The flexibility in opening up the panel is awesome too, because I have an ASUS ROG that has a cooling vent it has the hump for the cooling vent, but you can only open the panel so much, which it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're putting your laptop on a third-party cooler, it conflicts with some of those, and this one, to see it lay flat, that's pretty neat.
Interesting. I didn't think about the third-party cooler. What I judge my laptop swing, and I like that extra swing too, Paul. That's an interesting observation there. I judge my laptop as counter height, right? Like I do a lot of sitting. I'm sure you guys do it too. I'll literally stand and eat my dinner at the counter, and the family kind of looks at me like I'm nuts, but I'll sometimes stand over the counter for dinner. And having a laptop, or when I'm making dinner, having a laptop that swings open wide enough to point up at you, to have that display at the optimum angle, is not something you take for granted. Sometimes those hinges just don't swing enough to get that counter height standover. So anyways, good stuff, the folks at Alienware, and we'll be putting up the full review probably in the next couple of days, so come by and check that out. Benchmarks with this thing just absolutely lighten up the previous gen. Like if you looked at this machine and the benchmarks, I could share out some graphs, but I'll just speak to it quickly. Almost, actually, in a couple of benchmarks, 2x the performance of the previous gen Alienware 13 with OLED. Actually had OLED back then too, and a GTX 965M. So 1060 GeForce GTX 1060 mobile versus 965M in the previous gen, 2x in some cases the performance. And so you talk about the same 13-inch form factor, going 2x the graphics and gaming performance. That's impressive stuff. Battery life, if it comes in strong, I'm seriously gonna be jonesing to put this in my travel bag. I would travel with this machine. I'd take the horsepower for 5.5 pounds, no problem.
Absolutely, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. But let's move along. Let's stay on the graphics track. Let's talk about the GeForce GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti. Marco, you took a look at those from NVIDIA, right? Recently launched.
I sure did. So I probably should have grabbed a card before I started, but I wasn't thinking. I grabbed the ZenBook instead. So yes, NVIDIA finally completely fleshes out Pascal top to bottom, from super high end with Titan X down to entry level now with the 1050 and 1050 Ti. The 1050 starts at only $109. The Ti's are starting at around $139. These are not a cut down 1060. There's a brand new GPU on these cards. So it's a GP 106 is on 1060. This is the GP 107 on 1050, and basically it's obviously the same architecture. It's Pascal, so same features are supported. It's just pared down to these kind of smaller, lower power cards. The GeForce GTX 1050 has 2 graphics processing clusters. 1050 Ti also has 2, but the 1050 has 5 SMs versus 6 in the Ti. The Ti also has a few more texture units as a result, and different frame buffer sizes. 1050 has 2 gig, 1050 Ti has 4 gig. If you're buying a graphics card today, 4 gig is the absolute minimum, in my opinion. So 1050 is really maybe only for a home theater PC or something, in my opinion. 1050 Ti with 4 gigs is, I'm not going to call it future-proof, but it's more future-proof than a 2 gig card, obviously. So I tested a couple of models, a couple from MSI and one from EVGA. At their price points, pretty strong. They have no trouble dispatching the Radeon RX 460, but for slightly more money, Radeon RX 470 is a more powerful card. And obviously, if you can afford it, way more performance with the 1060. One interesting point with the GP 107 GPU on here, though, unlike all of the other Pascals that are manufactured at TSMC, these chips are made using Samsung's 14-nanometer process. So NVIDIA sourced these chips differently.
Why did I not catch that? Samsung, really?
Yep.
That makes sense.
And power was really good as well, and they overclocked. I think I just missed 2 gigahertz. Let me go double check quickly, but so not quite as high clocks as the chips made at TSMC, but power is right in line, and I did get significant overclocks out of them. So, no issues dual sourcing with Samsung.
I was going to say that's an issue, that's a point that I didn't pick up on the launch, and it's not trivial actually. GPUs, if folks don't know, in semiconductor technology, are a very complex, very high-end silicon structure to build. So when you talk about a GPU that's in 14 nanometer or what have you, bleeding edge manufacturing process, that's no joke. In some ways, the dies are huge. In some ways, it's even more complex than the average, standard CPU, x86 or what have you. And so you can see why these, whether it be NVIDIA or AMD, the GPU manufacturers align so tightly with the process partners, TSMC, in the case of NVIDIA, because you need to have things very tightly coupled. But what that does is that puts you at a disadvantage and a possible supply issue if your fab partner falls down, or if they can't meet demand, or for whatever reason, act of God for all that matter. And so having a second source is no joke to do. It takes a lot of resources to bring up a totally different fab for these, especially for these complex chips. And certainly for, the high volume, lower complexity chips like a 1050, wow, that's a lot of leverage for NVIDIA. And I think it's smart business that they've branched out beyond TSMC. Have they done that before? I can't remember them doing that.
Many years ago, I forget the particular GPU, but it's been multiple generations since they've used anyone else. And now the other interesting point to make with this particular GPU is it's so low power that the cards don't need supplemental power connectors. So now you kind of open up a whole world of these cheap OEM systems that have integrated graphics, but maybe 300 watt PSUs with no PCI Express power connectors. Now you can add GeForce GTX class cutting edge Pascal graphics to these machines and, get some decent gaming out of them. You're not going to blow away the benchmarks, but all of a sudden, if you are saddled with one of these OEM machines or, white box machines for whatever reason, you are now just a single purchase away. You don't need to upgrade your PSU as well. And I should also mention, there will be versions with power connectors that will probably overclock higher. I double checked. I hit 1.91 gigahertz on the samples that I got here. I would suspect that cards with power connectors will go even higher.
Huh. Yeah, I'm actually gonna share out the graph here. So this is really a 1080p play. So if you're looking to do full HD 1080p gaming with high to ultra, perhaps, I guess, settings, you're talking about playable frame rates in the 40 to 60 frames per second range. Is that a fair assessment?
Not across the board. You probably might have to dial details down a little bit to hit that 60 frames per second mark, but you can, it's definitely a 1080p and below play. Yeah.
And any cutting edge game, any current title, DX12 or otherwise. Is that fair?
Well, it will run any cutting edge game because it is Pascal. It's the latest architecture, and if the Ti specifically with that 4 gigs, it should have plenty of space for a frame buffer for 1080p. If the game is super demanding, you will have to dial down some of the details, but you should be able to run anything on there.
Forgive me if you mentioned this. Is the 4 gig frame buffer the Ti version? Obviously that's, I think, the way to go. What kind of price add or kicker is on there?
It's 109 is for the 1050, 139 for 1050 Ti.
Your opinion, worth the $30 to go for that 4 gig frame buffer?
Absolutely. The 1050 would be great for a home theater kind of casual PC where maybe you don't care about resolutions and you're not going to run cutting edge games and don't need the frame buffer. But if you are, just looking to build a cheap gaming PC and you're on a super tight budget and you can't spend more than $130 on a graphics card, that extra 2 gigs is absolutely worth it.
Gotcha, Paul. What are you gaming on these days? Are you jonesing for Pascal or perhaps a Polaris?
You keep me too busy to game too much, so it doesn't really matter. But no, I have a pair of 780 Ti's that are holding me over for now. But yeah, I wouldn't mind hopping on Pascal at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tell you, I actually gamed this weekend. I did. I played for probably an hour and a half, which was crazy. Titanfall 2. I tried it out. Damn fun game. I was like, I may actually carve out more time for gaming. Yeah, I was impressed by that. EA really kind of nailed it with that thing. Kind of a overshadowed by Battlefield 1, I think, on the release. But yeah, impressive stuff. If you guys haven't checked it out yet.
I haven't played it, but I have a funny gaming related story I want to tell quickly.
Please.
One of my fitness buddies, my boxing club closed, and I had hooked one of the owners up with a gaming PC, something basic, a quad core with, I think it was a R9 270 in there. But he finally got it set up, and he bought the latest Call of Duty over the weekend. And I was just checking in to say, hey, how you holding up? What'd you do this weekend? I played 10 hours of Call of Duty today. So I was like, his wife's going to kill me, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Nice. You corrupted another one. Good job.
Yeah, I always try to convert people to the PC. So yeah, I think I've converted another.
Corrupt in a good way, of course, and only in the nicest of ways. Yeah,
Yes.
let's move along. Let's talk networking real quick, and then we'll wrap up. Actually had a chance to look at something new in the area of Wi-Fi routers, Wi-Fi home networking. And I took a look at Netgear's Orbi, which is a new class of 802.11ac Wi-Fi router that is built on mesh technology. And it's actually, in my opinion, the niche, the product niche is, it's not so much a niche anymore. There's other players jumping in. Google came out with Google Wi-Fi, and there's a couple other startups that are starting to get into this mesh technology as well. But it's targeted at a very specific, I think, use case, and that is the application that absolutely needs the biggest range you can get. So maybe you've got a big house, or you want to have Wi-Fi out on the deck, in the backyard. Whatever your use case is, if you need that signal to get the furthest reach possible, not necessarily maybe the fastest bandwidth, but the furthest quality reach signal you can get possible, if that's your use case, you ought to take a look at Wi-Fi mesh routers. If you're familiar with the technology of the range extender back in the day, and they're still out there being sold in the market. They don't work very well. I'm not sure if you've ever tried one, but you hook up a range extender, you link it up with your router, and that range extender essentially relays and amplifies the signal, another hop in your dwelling or wherever you are that you need to extend that signal. The problem with it is it's single channel, and it's not bidirectional. So essentially it cuts the bandwidth in half, and performance just generally sucks for all intents and purposes when I've ever tried a range extender. And I have a house where just our setup, the home office is downstairs, and that's where the nerve center is, and the router's down in the basement in the depths. And then we have the living room at the other end of the house, opposite end of the house of the corner of the basement where the router is, where all the feeds from, the internet are coming in, and our, electrical box and all that good stuff. Total opposite corner of the house. So it's the longest reach through at least one level, sometimes two levels if you're upstairs in a bedroom. And I found that even the most powerful, like Netgear's Nighthawk 8X or X8, router with amplified antennas still couldn't quite make the reach from one end of the house to the other. The Orbi system, which is very different in the way it sets up, it doesn't work off that range extender principle, actually solved the problem completely. So I'll share this out, and the way these work are it's interesting stuff. It actually was initially pioneered in the enterprise, so much more expensive, complex systems. But here you've got the box, and I will show you how this works. You've got the base and the satellite, and just real quickly here, what they do is they literally it's an entirely separate router, secondary router that you would put up on the next level or that next hop away that you need to extend the coverage for, and they actually connect to each other in a mesh. And traditionally mesh routers use each other's channels to connect to each other over. So a spare channel, whether it be a 5 gigahertz channel or a 2.4 gigahertz channel, depending on how the router's built, they'll connect to each other, they'll mesh with each other. And then essentially you've got that backhaul link between the two of them. And then, obviously the router is broadcasting Wi-Fi and accepting clients, at the satellite and communicating it back down over that backhaul link to the base router. What's different about the Orbi, and what you can see here, is it's got a 5 gigahertz quad stream, what they call quad stream. It's, marketing speak, but it's a quad stream, 433 megabits per second stream, 5 gigahertz channel backhaul. So a very fat pipe. There's 4 channels here times 433 megabits per second. So 1733 megabits per second, 1.7 gigahertz channel worth of bandwidth. And so the front end has, dual, 433 megahertz, 5 gigahertz channels for clients, and dual 2.4 gigahertz, 200 megabits per second, channels for clients as well. And what you're left with is a mesh router with a dedicated backhaul channel that is not limiting or throttling that bandwidth at all. And I was able to realize a beautiful, 5 gigahertz 802.11 AC signal at all reaches of the home. Here's the kit right now. You've got, you need to have, provisions for this. It's got 2 AC adapters, so you're going to need to have a source for that satellite to plug it into. What you're not seeing here, let me see if I can get to the next page. It's also got a bunch of Ethernet ports. So you've got the base here on the left with the yellow dedicated port for your internet link that would connect to your WAN or to your cable provider or what have you, your fiber connection. And then the satellite also has 4 dedicated gigabit Ethernet ports as well. So you've got Wi-Fi, you've got USB 2. That was the only drawback. I wish there was a USB 3 connectivity there if you wanted to hang like a USB drive on there for network storage. But you've got Wi-Fi, you've got 4 dedicated gigabit Ethernet links on the satellite, and they all can ride on that fat backhaul, that 5 gigahertz backhaul wireless link between the satellite and the main router. And performance with the thing was just fantastic. I mean, I have a peak internet connection of like 175 megs down. It's like 13 megs up. I was realizing, I'd hit speedtest.net in every reach of my house, and I could get full throttle, wide open, full bandwidth everywhere I went. So good stuff. What do you guys think? Would you consider these, or this is not your application?
I would if I absolutely couldn't run another wire. If you don't have an option to run another wire to just throw it on their access point on another floor, then yeah, I would consider it. It's way better than the range extender option. If you can finagle a way to wire something, that's obviously the way to go, though. Yeah,
like hardwired versus wireless, sure, of course. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just impressed. I mean, like, let me share this out too. Let me share out one of the charts. This is a good example. So this is the application of 70 feet, from base to client, from the base router to the client is a 70-foot reach through one level of a dwelling, floors, walls, doors in the way, all that good stuff. The top bar is the Netgear Orbi Duo, whether it be UDP or TCP transfers. And then the bottom bars, the bars underneath that, are actually very high-end routers. I have a Netgear Nighthawk X8 router here. And again, very fast 802.11 AC router that's really struggling to make the reach. And as you can see, the Orbi just meshed that thing up as full bandwidth, and it's pulling down, 250 to 300 megabits per second. No problem on that reach. When you went to multiple levels where it had to punch through multiple levels of walls and floors, and a shorter reach application, that's this next bar down, you can see the Nighthawk actually, it does have beam forming. The Orbi does as well. But the Nighthawk was able to beamform a little bit better through walls on a shorter reach because it could get its signal across and just edge out the Orbi. But still, much more consistent performance, whether it be at distance or not quite as distant at distance through multiple levels. And so that's, I guess, the moral of the story with these things is that if you're looking for consistent Wi-Fi signal across a larger area, check out the mesh technologies that are on the market these days, and specifically Netgear's Orbi. I was impressed with it. Not too bad. A little on the pricey side, $399 for a kit, a 2-satellite kit. But if you need it, I don't think there's any other technology in the market that can do it right now. Cool.
It's interesting, your performance benchmarks there, because the 5 gigahertz band, it's really bad at going through obstructions, but it looks like this is a kind of an easy solution to that if you need it.
Yeah, well, it's not. It came behind the Netgear Nighthawk, the 802.11 AC 5 gigahertz router. or 5 gigahertz channel on the dedicated standard router, but not by much. It was like, I guess it's, probably 20 to 70 megs a second slower. But what was interesting was this thing was getting signal where I couldn't get signal before with the standard router. And that's what's really the hook with this, is you're always going to have a signal that's quality, that you can get some bandwidth. I'm still, by the way.
Well, maybe I looked at that wrong. Was that because of a distance or because of obstructions?
It's probably more in this case. The antennas with the Orbi aren't quite as robust as the Nighthawk's big honking, powered antennas. But it still is able to make the signal. And you're talking about 130 to 160 megabits per second. I'm still pulling down full internet bandwidth with that. So 2.4 gigahertz channel. The Orbi actually smoked the Nighthawk, even in that, multi-level exchange. So, and you have to remember, the Orbi is competing actually from one level up, right? So that satellite is on the first level and it's going through another level on the second floor to hit the client, whereas the dedicated router has to punch through on its own, and it still was able to outperform it on the 5 gigahertz channel. So interesting nuances there, to be sure. But if you need reach, if reach is your main issue with Wi-Fi, check these out. Check out the latest crop of mesh routers. I think the technology is really going to evolve more, and they're going to get better and better. I think this is where it's at for a lot of folks. And the other nice thing is there's the design aesthetic. If you need that access point in your living room, it's a pretty box, doesn't look as clunky and mechanical, I guess, but that's secondary. Marco, what are you laughing at?
No, I agree with you. Like, I've seen so many wacky router installations in people's homes, and it makes you shake your head sometimes. At least that, if it was out on a shelf or somewhere in plain view, it looks good.
Yeah. What's funny is the router designs these days, the high performance routers, are really appealing to a performance enthusiast with their super sleek freaking race car designs and these big honking antennas that look like, guns on a battleship. But these go the opposite way. These are for, I guess, maybe the civilized crowd. I don't know what's civilized these days. But Marco, speaking of civilized, before we wrap up, why don't you talk about our latest little giveaway that we did, and maybe some things in the future?
Yes, we just wrapped up our fall giveaway. We recently gave away a beautiful HP notebook. It was an HP Pavilion X360 13T. We just had it up for grabs on the site. Super easy to win. You come by HotHardware, you participate in our community, like a couple of Facebook pages, and just participating in the community got you entered into the giveaway. So that just ended a couple of days ago, and our reader Static FX won that gorgeous machine. It is on the way to him. You should have it any day. We don't have the ability to announce the next giveaway, but this is the kind of stuff that if you're new to HotHardware, we do this kind of stuff all the time, and it's super easy to win. And you just come by the site and chat with like-minded folks that like tech like you. And these are not the super tech nerds that can't see past the propeller on their cap. These are cool tech nerds that read an enthusiast site like HotHardware. So come by, participate, and make sure you're here when we announce that next giveaway. It will be soon.
They're not tech nerds that have the propeller on their cap. They're tech nerds like Paul that have like a pimp hat.
Yeah, that will cut you if you get out of luck.
Hey, come by the site, please. Don't make me disappointed in you. Well, anyways, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thanks for catching up with us again. Folks, stop by hothardware.com if you get a chance. That's where we're located on the web. You can find us at facebook.com/hothardware, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com/hothardwarevids. We are on Google+. Just search for Hot Hardware there. Paul, we're like white on rice, right? Am I right?
Exactly.
Like white on your hat.
That's a good thing. We're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Yeah, baby. So, all right. Well, thanks for stopping by, everybody, and take care. Have a great week. We'll catch you in the next one.